Are you a multi-potentialite doing more than one thing because it is a true calling for you to help as many people as you possibly can? It's what fills your bucket or buckets. This week on the Today is the Day Changemakers podcast, I'm joined by the purpose-driven Sarah Giberson, a visionary leader wearing two powerful hats. She's the owner of Pink Moon Yoga, a space she created to inspire grounding, healing, and reconnection. Listen in to hear how this practice came about for her, and now how she is sharing it with the community. She's also the Director of Real Estate Development and Marketing for the Fort Monmouth Economic Revitalization Authority, also known as FMERA, where she's helping breathe new life into a former military base now home to transformational projects like Netflix, breweries, Baseline Social, and so much more, including a new hospital that will open in the future that specializes in renowned cancer treatment. In this episode, Sarah and I dive into the duality of leadership and self-care, what it means to stay purpose-driven, and how to remain rooted while helping entire communities rise. She shares her thoughts on balancing a full life, the importance of arts in our communities, and even reflects on lessons learned from a favorite book of hers by Jay Shetty. This is a conversation for anyone looking to reconnect with themselves, align with their purpose, and be reminded that it's possible to lead with impact while still caring for your soul. Please subscribe to the Today is the Day Changemakers YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Today is the Day Live It. Also, Today is the Day is now hosting events with former Changemaker guests who have so much to share. These are incredible people who you would not typically have the opportunity to meet, as they are from all over the globe. Go to todayisthedayliveit.com for more information. Have a great week, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I'm your host, Jody Grinwald, and as I say every single episode, I interview the changemakers, the inspirers, and those who are disrupting the status quo in the best way possible every day. And today, I'm so happy to have my guest, Sarah Giberson. Hi, Sarah.
Hello, Jody. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. And for those who may be streaming, you can't see her beautiful backdrop, but she has this beautiful backdrop behind her. And we're going to talk about Pink Moon Yoga and all that she's doing right now. But I'm going to read your bio first, Sarah. Sound good?
Perfect.
All right. So, envisioning her yoga practice as nothing more than a stepping stone to jumpstarting a rigorous fitness routine, Sarah's journey to health and wellness turned into a way of life. Compelled to share this transformative practice with others, Sarah went on to pursue her 200-hour and 500-hour yoga teacher certification. Sarah's also a certified instructor in mat and reformer Pilates and is trained in the Pilates suspension method. That sounds like a lot of fun. And the barbell method. Her additional professional certifications include the Science of Exercise from the University of Colorado, Boulder, and Engineering Health, and Introduction to Yoga and I can't even say this word. Oh my God.
Physiology, is that what it says?
Thank you. I can't even say the word physiology from NYU. Sarah opened her first Pink Moon Yoga and Wellness Studio in 2021, her second in 2023, and recently opened Moon Core Reformer Pilates. But that's not all Sarah does. When she's not in the studio, she is the lead of Fort Monmouth's real estate team, serving as the Director of Real Estate Development and Marketing for over 7 years. Sarah has managed FMERAs, is what it's called in its short acronym for those who don't know. She has managed FMERA's investor and developer attraction, selection, contract negotiations, and project management processes. Sarah oversees FMERA's governance and communication functions and serves as FMERA's public relations liaison. There's so much there, Sarah, truly so much there. And I couldn't say physiological or what is it? Oh
Physiology.
My God, physiology. What is wrong with me today? Okay. I don't know. Some days we can't say certain words. Physiology. I'm gonna have to practice that one. Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to have you. And I don't even know where to start because you have so many great things going on. But I do want to start with, as I do with most of my, guests, is where did you grow up? And what kind of a child were you? Outgoing, quiet? Who was Sarah?
So I did grow up in Seaside Park near Island Beach State Park. I always throw that in because, for anyone who was a fan of some reality TV in the 2000s, I always like to differentiate that it is not the same as the Jersey Shore you saw on TV. So I did grow up as a beach kid, spent a lot of time by the beach, by the ocean. and it's somewhere that I've been drawn back to. So, I did later in my life spend some time living in Jersey City and other places, but ultimately the shore is really where my heart is. So, I've been down here since, I guess, my family moved down here when I was about 4 years old. So grew up down here, went to school in Seaside Park, and then, the rest of my, schooling basically in this area until I was off in college. But I pretty much was always an outgoing child, very energetic, and always excited to do new things. I always laugh because when I was in kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher would give out these awards like at the end of the year. And I got an award for asking what we were going to do next, which I'm not sure was an award more than a citation of the fact that maybe I drove her a little crazy because I was always excited in getting into the next project. So, Jody, you know me pretty well at this point in time. I think probably that translates to adulthood, right? That, I'm always trying to do a million things at once. So, I think I did that as a kid and I do it now. I've always been really interested in service and helping people. So even when I was a kid, me and my best friend growing up, we started a little club called the Let's Make a Difference Club. And that was actually based on, if you remember way back in the day, Rosie O'Donnell, again, before maybe she had any controversy surrounding her when she had her TV show, she had a Let's Make a Difference Club. So we actually were sort of inspired to do that and to try to do little do-gooder things like in our community. So from the time I was little, I've always been interested in sort of helping other people and being a part of community. So I hope to translate that, into my adulthood now with what I do.
I love the Let's Make a Difference Club. And how old were you when you started that?
Who I'm gonna say we were probably maybe in like second or third grade. I can't remember 100%, but one of our funniest stories is one time we decided that we wanted to sell handmade Beanie Babies to raise money. And then our mothers wanted to, I don't know what us, because we decided we also wanted them to be waterproof because some parent asked us if they could be like tub friendly. So of course us as, however old we were, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, we're like, yeah, sure, no problem. Like we'll make them terry cloth. So, we were always very entrepreneurial, even as little kids.
Look at that. And yes, and that is a rarity, but your energy absolutely, I can envision you as the child with all this energy because you always have all of that or surrounding you and around you. And I can also see you with the what's next, right? Because you're also
Yes.
so we're all so busy. And we'll talk more about that, about the juggle and the struggle of trying to do all the things that we're so passionate about, because I know that firsthand too. And there's only so much time in a day that we can do all the things we want to do. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But so then as you were growing up, what did you think you were going to do and be when you grew up?
Oh goodness. I mean, I think this plays into me doing a million things at once, right? Because when I was a kid, I did really for a long time, I wanted to be a veterinarian because I love animals. So again, I just feel like being sort of helpful and compassionate has been something that always kind of was at my core. I'm, certainly not a perfect person, but I had this love for animals and also just for all things that are small and in need of someone else's support, right? But then of course, as a child, you don't realize that also there's a not so great side to being a veterinarian. So I very quickly realized that I could not probably deal with the sad side of dealing with sick pets and animals as much as I still love them to this day. As I got a little bit older, I really got very interested in design work. So that was one of the things that actually became an interest of mine later in life. So of course, that's not necessarily something that's super helpful or in the wheelhouse, right, of helping people, but it was just something I was drawn to. So ultimately, having that interest and then sort of kind of developing that skill set did turn into something where I could help some people because I've definitely worked on some different campaigns for people, whether it was for people I believed in politically or whatever their mission was. I've done some work for nonprofits, sort of from a donation standpoint, everything from invitations to galas, invitations for friends to weddings and things like that. So ultimately, I found a way to sort of give back, if you will, through doing that. But that was kind of my first jumping off point after college was I really was involved in design and marketing. And then things kind of just exploded beyond that into sort of all these different avenues where I am today.
So did you find yourself at, like right out of college in nonprofit?
So my very first job was not nonprofit, but I've only ever had one sort of career level job that was not a nonprofit or a job that had sort of like a public benefit. So I did initially have a job working for a design firm. I then ultimately decided that one of the reasons that wasn't going to be sort of my direct pathway was I'm also really passionate about the things that I believe in and that I think are a great representation of, be it a brand or a message or whatever. And sometimes when you're a creative person and you have clients, they don't always necessarily align, right, with what you think makes the most sense. And that kind of goes with the job. But sometimes you also feel like you don't want to put sort of your name or reputation right on something that you don't like believe in. So that was one of the things that actually caused me to kind of move away from that a little bit more, because working independently in design, I could choose what sort of clients I wanted to work with. Whereas if I worked for a design firm and I was, given a project, well, it's just your responsibility to do what the client asks, right? And I get that and I respect it, but ultimately I decided it just wasn't the route I wanted to stick with. So after that, I did end up moving into the nonprofit space, which again just kind of circles back to who I am at my core. I love to do mission-based work. So my first nonprofit job, I actually worked primarily with individuals with developmental disabilities. After that, I did move more back into the art space. I worked at a theater, an arts council. I worked for an independent film festival. So a lot of things that have this sort of creativity component, but also nonprofits where they're looking to really make an impact on the community. And when you're looking to fundraise, that you can give opportunities to people who don't have the means otherwise to maybe participate in some of those really great programs. So now that I'm at the fort, it's not a nonprofit. We are a government authority, but I will say we do have a mission. And part of the mission is obviously to reinvigorate a community that really was suffering. So from that perspective, I do feel like I'm still staying strong, right, to my roots of wanting to be in mission-based work from that perspective.
How long were you working for nonprofits before FMERA?
Let's see. Well, I'm going to say maybe 7 or 8 years before that.
And on the fundraising side, or you did other things?
No, I mostly worked in marketing. So again, sort of still in that marketing design space. I did, as you know, Jody, from being at nonprofits a lot, right? We all kind of wear many hats. So you get involved in the fundraising and the outreach and the sort of trying to, build up, whether it's membership or donors or other. But my primary role was generally in marketing. So I started out in more of an entry level marketing and design positions. And then before I moved over to FMERA, I was the director of marketing at Monmouth Arts Council, which is in Red Bank. So.
Oh, I didn't know you worked there. See, I learn about,
Yeah.
even though I sometimes know personally for quite some time my guests, I don't know certain things about them. So I
Yeah,
learned it here on the podcast. It's awesome.
that's
So that's,
right.
yeah, that's great. And so because you said you worked for different arts organizations, and knowing that I have a nonprofit that's about arts for kids, what would you say to someone? Because I think it's always good, because most people I don't think understand how important the arts is, and working in
Sure.
nonprofit for the arts. What would be your message to someone who may be listening, of what the arts gives back to the community, to kids, to whomever is benefiting?
Oh my gosh, I feel like I could talk about that for hours of time because there's so many different facets of why the arts are important. I think from a more thinking about just our society and like the economic impact standpoint, the arts are essentially a multiplier for everything in a community. So if you have a community that has a theater, for example, if people are going to the theater, they're most likely also going to go out to dinner. They might stay in a hotel locally. So there's this sort of snowball effect, that there's this economic impact of the arts that sometimes I think people forget about. The one thing I will say about having worked in the arts was that I felt like the arts of all and sort of facets, right, of where you could be in the nonprofit space,
Hmm.
arts are one of the ones that was sort of the hardest to fight for when it came to funding or other, because there are
Yes.
a lot of things that compete with the arts that are really important, and when you were working at an arts organization, maybe standing up against an organization that helps battered women and children, right? And you're fighting for grant funding, it's really
Right.
hard, right? Because that seems like
Yeah.
there's this immediate need, there's this sort of disaster situation where, people need help. And that's all very true. But the arts have such a long-standing economic impact and an emotional impact, and give people pathways to other opportunities that they may not have otherwise had. So, you know, the arts are one of those things that I think just brings so much joy into people's lives. And I think a lot of times people don't think too intentionally about what the arts encompasses. So if you're somebody who turns on the radio, you turn on a television, I mean, that's art. So, when people feel like the arts are not something where you have the capacity to make money or to be successful or any of those things, it's just so not true. And obviously the arts expands to everything, whether it's something that's digital media, whether it's fine art and you're a painter. And the arts just also have such a therapeutic quality. Whether you're participating in them or whether you're somebody who actually is a practicing artist, it's something that is just so meaningful if you just put your mind to it and say, this is an opportunity for me to just escape, to breathe, to create. Just the way we do in yoga, where we talk a lot about journaling and other ways to sort of redirect yourself when you're stressed or anything else. I mean, art is another opportunity for that. I'm sure if you have an arts organization, you'll know all too well like the impact that the arts can have on children, particularly children who are living in places of economic strife, or if they're struggling with home situations. Again, it is an escape for them. And it's not just an escape physically, it's something where they have this opportunity to sort of rewire their brain, right? And give themselves this opportunity to have their own voice, to be creative, and again, to just have that experience and even to build relationships with other people who have similar interests. So, as I said, I could talk about the arts forever. They're just so beautiful and amazing. There's so many facets, and it breaks my heart when the arts doesn't get the attention it deserves, because it's so critical to our communities. And you look around some of the cities in New Jersey who have struggled. And all of a sudden, when you see murals popping up and street art and other, pop-up installations, they create places, right, that people want to go. And when people want to go, they invest, and that's what brings things back to life. So it's just, they're part of the cycle, right, of just making things sort of amazing and accessible. And again, I just go back to joy. Like, the arts just bring joy into people's lives.
You're speaking my language, that is for sure. And whenever I hear any of my guests are connected to the arts, I always, or have been, I always bring it up, because I feel like the more we share about the fact of what it can bring, the arts organizations need support too. They need a little love too. It makes a major difference in the communities. But I love, you can tell that you work for FMERA too, because the first thing you brought up was the economic impact
Sure.
of the of the arts in the community, because your passion, from what I'm seeing from this side of the Zoom screen and knowing you, is your passion for the work that you do at FMERA. Is it, you just gleam with it, and you are so knowledgeable, and you start running off all the things, which I won't make you do on this podcast, all the things that is going on, and we'll explain what FMERA is in a minute. But I just want the audience to know, for those who don't know you personally, you would think you are working for a nonprofit with the amount of excitement and passion you have for the work that you're doing. So before we go deep into this, why don't you talk to, let everybody know, what is this thing called FMERA?
Sure. Happy to. So, again, I could talk about this for 2 hours too, as Jody has seen me on other occasions do. So, FMERA is short for Fort Monmouth Economic Revitalization Authority. So, it's a very long-winded word. So, we typically stick with the acronym, but we are the authority who was charged with redeveloping the former Fort Monmouth, which is a closed Army base. So there's a process at the federal government level, that's called BRAC. And essentially, BRAC is a decision that is made at the federal level, where they decide that a fort or a installation of some sort essentially has sort of completed its mission, if you will, or the work that the mission needs to do is no longer necessary at that particular location. So it's essentially the decommissioning of a base or another installation that no longer is needed from the perspective of the federal government. So Fort Monmouth was a huge economic driver in Monmouth County. So it's actually in 3 communities: Tinton Falls, Eatontown, and Oceanport. And the fort actually closed more than a decade ago. Now at this point, we're almost 2 decades ago. So when we look back to sort of the fort, this idea of the fort closing, it was really difficult for a lot of people in the community to kind of swallow this idea that this was going to go away, because not only were there countless civilian employees who were living and working in the area, but also obviously military families there who had made their home there, lots of memories there, et cetera, et cetera. So what our job is to take is this 1,200 acre piece of property and to redevelop it in accordance with a plan that was designed by our predecessor agency. And the reason I mentioned the plan is because one of the things that's really important to FMERA and important to our mission is, while sort of economic revitalization is our focus, it's to do economic revitalization in a way that is meaningful to the communities and has this sort of diverse mix of opportunities that creates this, if you will, live, work, play type of environment. So it was not our intention to sort of just find one big end user to come in, take up all this land and decide, like, we're going to build all residential, or we're going to build all commercial. So this plan has been our guideline, and obviously we have the capacity to sort of amend the plan, if you will, because of course, we took title to the first portion of the fort in 2014. So if you think about how drastically sort of the economic landscape has changed since that point in time, some of the ideas that were put in this plan, which was written in either 2007 or 2008, obviously some things have changed about the market and what the demand is. So we want to also be mindful, right, about what the need is now in the community. So, as of this time, we've got about 86% of the fort that's redeveloped or under contract. And we have such an amazing, incredible mix of things going on there. And I won't name them all, so I'll just try to name a few, but we've got everything from, a private all-girls school that's STEM focused, so really highlighting an opportunity that wasn't available, because there's a lot of great private schools for young men in the region, but not as many for women. So that's a great opportunity. Trinity Hall. Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas Health is building a state-of-the-art cancer center. So just making that sort of opportunity more available and more accessible to people who are in need of those types of treatments, which, I mean, how can we complain, right, about having more opportunities to better our own health and find care for ourselves and others? So that's another huge one. We've got several tech companies. We actually have a defense contractor who, he and his wife worked at the fort before it closed. They decided to buy a piece of property, prop up their own sort of entity at the fort, and they still work with the fort's mission, which is actually moved down to Maryland. So that's just kind of a cool second generation, thing that's gone on there. And again, lots of retail coming online, lots of residential. We've got breweries, eateries, we've got a marina, all kinds of good stuff. And of course, the thing that people get most excited about, which again is super exciting, but I don't want to, skip giving the love to all these other great projects and people who trusted to, invest in our project. But we've got Netflix coming. So when you talk about the arts, right, like this is a huge one for the region. So they are purchasing almost 300 acres from us. It's 282 acres. And they'll be building a state-of-the-art sound studios, a huge campus that's going to have all sort of the support services that go along with that. So they're looking at a minimum of 12 sound stages. So the amount of production they'll be able to do is just huge. It's obviously going to create great opportunities for people in this area, whether they're people who work more in like union type trades, like tradespeople who might be working on lighting and rigging and all other things related to production, or people who are more on the creative side of things, whether you're looking to be an extra or work on makeup or whatever else. So there's just all kinds of opportunities that are going to exist for that. So they're pretty early stage in their project in the grand scheme, because this is a huge project. So if you drive through the fort at this time, you won't actually see anything that makes you think Netflix is about to build a studio campus. But we're hoping that in the next couple of months, they're going to start doing some demolition of existing structures that are on site that won't be reused. Another really cool thing about our work is we have tried, in the instances where we can, to encourage the reuse and repurposing of assets. So granted, they will not be able to use a lot, but Netflix is going to reuse a couple of buildings and structures that were on the fort, as well as some other entities have done this too. That defense contractor I mentioned earlier, they actually purchased a building and renovated it and rehabbed it and brought it up to sort of modern standards. So that was another goal of the plan, right, is to try to be sustainable in that way, to see if we could reuse some of these assets. So we just have so many great things going on there. Again, it's something I could talk about endlessly. But one of the reasons I actually went over to the fort is, as much as I didn't really want to leave the art space and the nonprofit space, right, is someone actually reached out to me at the fort. He's since retired, but he actually reached out to me to say, hey, we really need somebody like you to help us remarket the property in a way that's going to attract people who are not just business people, if you will, right? So it was also important before I got there to some of the staff people to make sure we also had these opportunities available to people who were interested in arts and entertainment and sort of placemaking, if you're familiar with the term, right? So that way it became a place that was not just somewhere that someone either went to do business or went to, go to sleep at night, when they buy their apartment or their single family home. So I've been involved in a sort of a lot of the projects that have more of this kind of arts flair, if you will. Obviously, Netflix being the largest of them all. So that's super exciting.
It's very exciting, and I know you're like the sought after person in the community. Everybody wants to talk to you. You're the superstar in the community because of your closeness with Netflix, as well as all the other things that are happening there. And I have a family member who has an organization there, an eatery there, which is amazing, and we're so happy that he is there. So there's a lot of work still happening, and you mentioned, and I know this I wanted to talk about the live work play piece because I think that's becoming very popular. I don't know if that's happening. I think it is across the country, not just here in the state of New Jersey. But talk a little bit about that, because what I do love about that, that's about bringing community together, right? So you've got all the wonderful businesses there, you're living there, you get to play there. Talk a little bit about the what that's going to look like eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in our plan, a couple of the goals that were set forth for the fort was not only obviously the redevelopment and the thing that would be the economic drivers, if you will. It was also this idea of creating these spaces, right, that would be publicly accessible and that people could enjoy. So, one of the things we've looked a lot at is connectivity. So, one of the things you can expect to see at the fort once everything is sort of built out is a fort-wide walking trail. So obviously mentioned that the fort is 1,200 acres and we're actually in two separate sections. So we are divided by a highway and some other areas of the town that are not actually considered part of the fort. So the trail itself will primarily be on what we call the main post, which is the largest portion of the fort, which is in Eatontown and Oceanport. But that's going to be a giant loop that essentially gives people the opportunity to walk around the entire site to sort of meander, right? So that they have this ability to kind of check out all different things that are going on. Maybe you stop down at one place to get a bite to eat. You want to sit outside on a bench and look over at the river over there. You have that opportunity too. So we've really tried to create spaces, right, that make people want to not just come and do what they need to do and leave, but that they're then interested, right, in sort of walking around and seeing what else is going on. And hopefully they're interested in popping out into somebody else's business, right? And checking out what they've got going. So in addition to that, we had a goal of trying to preserve up to 40% open space on the fort. So that's another thing that I think sort of encourages this live, work, play environment, right? Is because for those of you who are maybe living outside of a city, right, and you want to live in more of a bedroom community, but you still want access to good stuff like food and entertainment and all of that. It's also really nice to have beautiful outdoor spaces because most of us don't want to, just feel like we can reach out our window and touch our neighbor, which is how a lot of us feel in New Jersey, right? There's a lot of development. We're a highly populated state. So we've got a couple of areas where we have these really beautiful, vast open spaces, green spaces that we expect in the future will be used by the municipalities for sports things. They might be used for outdoor events. We've had a couple of festivals actually at the fort already. Some of them being partially on privately owned property at this point, like properties that have already been developed, but also kind of spilling into some of the property that we still own. So we've had a food truck festival already. We've had several sort of 5K type races that have supported good initiatives. One of the parks actually that we sold to the borough of Eatontown, that is actually now dedicated to someone in the military who was from Eatontown that lost their life in Iraq. So again, another way to sort of pay some tribute, right, to the idea that we had this fort to keep things local, right, to sort of celebrate this person. And then also that park is being developed now into a space where it's going to have a splash pad, it's going to have a dog park, it's going to have a little sort of concession stand. So again, something that people can use and enjoy that's always sort of available to them. So when you talk about live, work, play, the way you get people to stay places, right, is to create things that are desirable, that are pretty, that are beautiful. You encourage them to sit down, to pop down with a book. So we're really trying to work on that. And it's tough because we're a team of 7 people. So in addition to redeveloping all this property and working on contracts and all the things that are sort of business centric, these are the things we're trying not to lose sight of. So we've got some plans to try to prop up some historic signage along the path. So that way people have some idea about sort of like what was here before, all these beautiful new businesses and residences popped up. So we're trying to also kind of encourage people to keep that history of the fort alive. And I think a lot of that plays into this idea again of live, work, play. And then if you want to get really literal on the play, right, we're not as much involved in the tenants when it comes down to, say, a retail developer who develops like a larger, center where they're going to bring in tenants. But of course, they have incentive, right, to also bring in like a really great mix as well. So just to speak about one development in particular, I know for sure they're bringing in a company that does like squash and pickleball. They're bringing in another company that has sort of an American Ninja Warrior type vibe where you can do these sort of obstacle type courses. We've already got on site, we've got doctors, we've got chiropractors, we've got sort of your one stop shop, right? For like whether you want to go out and have a cocktail at happy hour or you feel like, you need to go get an adjustment on your lunch hour. We've really encouraged that sort of diversity of uses. And that's the beauty of the reuse plan too, right? Is that we know we had a target of getting this mix. So that way it was somewhere again that fit that sort of, I know it's kind of a term that's kind of thrown around a lot, the live, work, play, but it is true, right? It's like we all want to be in a place where we can not only get our jobs done, but we feel good about it at the end of the day and we want to spend time there, right? So we work hard to try to make sure that that's the kind of development we have going at the fort.
I don't, I actually, sounds to me like I want to move there because it's just sad.
Please do.
Getting in my car and driving in the traffic in New Jersey is just so much fun. So it sounds like, in that case, you don't really have to go too far for much. Just a quick side note, how many people will be able to live in the area there? Do you know?
So, we in our reuse plan had a target of 1,585 residential units. The reason I say target is because that has fluctuated a little bit over time. And some of that is because we're also super respectful of like what the municipalities desire to sort of have in their community as far as what is sort of happening in their school systems and others. So, for example, Eatontown actually took on all the children who lived on the fort in their school system. It didn't sort of matter what area of the fort you lived in. So Eatontown, for example, they've got a lot of sort of room in their schools, right? Because they lost all these students who used to be part of their population. Oceanport, on the other hand, they're a very small community. They don't have a ton of space. And we're trying to be mindful, right, of like, we don't want to overburden any particular community. So Eatontown has been very development friendly when it came to residential and commercial and other, just because they had a need, right? The other sort of important thing about our residential redevelopment is that we also have a 20% affordable component. So anyone who develops residential, 20% of the units they construct have to be affordable housing. And the one thing that I think is really important to mention about affordable housing, because there is unfortunately some attitudes from people, the sort of NIMBY attitude, right? Of not in my backyard. I don't want some particular type of person